Welcome to Gen X Mindscape, the podcast dedicated to exploring the complexities of midlife and the pursuit of a purposeful life. I'm your host, Kyle, here to accompany you on this journey. I'm really excited for you to hear this discussion today with Dr. Shinobu Kitayama. Dr. Kitayama is a distinguished psychologist and an influential scholar in the area of culture and well-being. I'm guessing many of you can relate to my experience where I've spent most of my life immersed in a single overarching culture. I wasn't really fully aware of how culture and cultural expectations could affect my perceptions of aging until I began reading some of Dr. Kitayama's articles. These readings were really insightful because they shed light on those societal expectations that often go unnoticed. For example, Western cultural norms often stress the importance of being enthusiastic and active and energetic, which can be beneficial in many situations. However, this can also lead to some challenges and a disconnect with the realities of aging. It's a natural part of aging that we may not have as much energy as we once did when we were younger. But we have many advantages compared to our younger selves as well. For example, we've accumulated knowledge and experience and self-understanding. So really, the challenge is to better understand these cultural expectations and to develop healthier perspectives on aging where we're capitalizing on those strengths that we've developed and we find healthy age-graded social roles. And as I learned from Dr. Kitayama, we can develop a richer perspective on aging as we integrate the wisdom from multiple cultures, which helps us find clarity and longevity in our sense of purpose. It was such an enjoyable conversation with Shinobu, and I'm just really excited for you to hear it. So let's introduce our guest. Today's guest is Shinobu Kitayama, a distinguished psychologist and an influential scholar in the area of culture and well-being. Dr. Kitayama is a professor of psychology and the director of the Culture and Cognition program at the University of Michigan. His research investigates the cultural differences and similarities in various mental processes such as self, emotion, and cognition, and I really appreciate his willingness to share his insights and his time with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I am very excited as well. Could you start by giving us some background and how you got on this path to exploring culture, aging, and well-being?
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Japan. I grew up in Japan. I went to college in Japan, and I came to the United States, actually to Michigan, to study psychology in graduate school. Now, of course, I study psychology in graduate school, but also I experienced lots of cultural shocks. That is, I found many aspects of American culture a little bit puzzling and interesting for sure. That really motivated me to study how culture might get into the body and the brain under the skin to form and influence our ways of thinking, feeling, and so on. And now I'm getting older, unfortunately or fortunately. And that brought me into this important topic of aging, how aging might vary across different cultural contexts, and what these cultural insights might tell us about current understanding of aging process in psychology and its neighboring field.
Yeah, definitely. And that makes a lot of sense. And as we discussed before we started recording, your articles have really broadened my perspective on this topic and have been extremely helpful. So how about if we start by talking a little bit about Western culture and Western perspectives on aging?
One thing that amazed me when I came here is that people are very, very enthusiastic. And that doesn't really surprise me when I interact with my, say, cohort, just the same age graduate students or even undergraduates. Young kids are supposed to be enthusiastic and positive and always thrilled to do a lot of different things. But, many of my professors are like that. Well, how come? You guys are older and supposed to be wiser and more relaxed and broadly encompassing wide field. And if you become so myopic by being excited, how can you be wise and how can you educate young folks like myself? Of course, I didn't say that to my advisors, but the very fact that many of my advisors and professors are so enthusiastic and so positive make me feel, oh, this is great. This is such a great culture. But at the same time, that was puzzling to me as well. And now, in the meantime, for 30 years or so, I didn't study aging. But when I came up with this idea, well, when we encountered this problem of aging in different cultural contexts, this initial puzzlement came back to me. And just I began asking whether that initial impression might carry some interesting theoretical insight. So for a long time, we argued that in American middle class, mostly European American culture, there's a strong belief of the self as an independent entity. You have preferences, you have attitudes, you have internal attributes, maybe personality, maybe motivations. Those internal attributes that define the self are very, very important. We call it independent self. Given this point of view, positive enthusiasm and being young seem to make sense. That is, you really have to utilize your positive attitudes, positive dispositions to organize your behavior, approach to other people, promote your goals, and do everything quite right by interacting with others as equals. So that's ideal scenario in American cultural context. So to interact with, say, younger students or to interact with younger colleagues, even if you are getting older and you know it at some level, your knee is hurting now in a way that did not before. Yeah. And yet, this culture demands that you energize yourself and you approach others and you engage with other people in very, very enthusiastic way. That's a cultural recipe of forming social relationship. So, okay, that's good, except for the fact that as a function of age, oftentimes your body and sometimes brain decline. And so there arises some dissonance. So we looked into some existing data and we actually did empirical studies as well. And what we are finding is that on the one hand, as a function of age, many Americans seem to seek positivity, positive energy, enthusiasm, and try to stay young. But at the same time, this seems to entail somewhat negative consequences, sometimes very negative consequences. That is, it's very hard oftentimes to catch up with this ideal, which can diminish your positive personality or even your sense of meaning in life. That's an interesting thing cultural comparison can do. Without really knowing other cultures, people may say, yeah, that's how things go. How else can that be? But, of course, when I initially came here, I was stunned that people are doing this. So we went back to the literature in East Asia, and for some time, we have argued that instead of independence, actually, East Asian cultures seem to emphasize interdependence. So it's not really you as a person that is driving the car, but really it's the car, social relationship and groups or some surrounding context that's driving you. So people are interdependent with the surrounding social relationships, and this interdependence is really essential. Maybe your social roles, maybe your social status, maybe peer expectations or parental expectations or whatever. Those role expectations is seen as fundamentally defining the self. So who you are is defined by, say, social roles, and your worth is defined by your capability to making due adjustment to different social contexts. So that's very different view of identity and self. Now, let's apply this to aging. Now, given this view of the self, it's just okay. And actually, it indicates some virtue to make adjustment to different social roles, which are oftentimes age-graded. So when you are young, it's just perfectly fine to be crazy, to be active, to be enthusiastic, and a little bit myopic. That's completely fine and actually desirable. But as you get older, well, you have to make adjustment. Okay. By the time you become a parent, for example, you'd better to have some social roles of which are appreciated, acknowledged in society. And also, you ought to be able to take care of your kid. How can you take care of your kids if you're acting like just a mere equal? You are, in some way, caretakers. You have to play the role of a model so that kids can see and maybe imitate and learn from. And then, maybe you climb the ladder in your company and eventually you have to retire. And then very different roles may come in. That is, what's the point of really actively engaging in everything when you have to retire? Now, you have to figure out new stage in your life. And this age-related decline might be less impactful, less damaging because of this willingness to make adjustment and cultural virtue attached to this adjustment.
Hey there, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to express my deep gratitude for listening and for your support. Today, I'm asking for a quick favor that won't cost you anything but would be very valuable to me, and that is, leave me a review. Positive reviews will help other like-minded Gen Xers find the show and join our community. These reviews are also a big encouragement to me to continue to develop the show and create helpful episodes for you. So thanks for sending a review my way, and thanks for being a part of the Gen X Mindscape community. Yeah, that's so insightful and has been really helpful for me to think about age-graded social roles as you've written about. For me, it's been thinking about the importance of being a supportive, mentoring, stable presence in other people's lives because of my experiences that I've gained and where I'm at in my phase of life. Another realization that's been really helpful for me revolves around your description of high arousal, positive emotions. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So high arousal positive emotions such as enthusiasm, joy, and pride, those are really important emotions. And especially American middle class culture, those emotions are valued very strongly, in part because they demonstrate personal virtue that you have. If you have positive self, positive energy, under the skin somewhere in your body, supposedly, your spirit is so positive. This positivity demands expression. So showing enthusiasm, showing joy, and showing pride is very important. Interestingly, that's a cultural thing. People anticipate you to express those high arousal emotions if you're a decent person. So when I came here, I surely didn't have this cultural demand internalized in me So toward the end of the day, people ask, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I was a little bit too honest in saying, "Oh, I'm tired." That didn't work. That didn't work. That's surely that elicited some degree of empathy or sympathy, whatever. But then say, "Oh yeah, take care. See you tomorrow." But when you do culturally appropriate saying, showing enthusiasm, yeah, this was a long day, but I feel very enthusiastic about this project. I get maybe just a glass of wine tonight, but I'll get back to this project. That's exactly what I want to do. So that's the right thing to say. And initially, I forced myself to pretend that I have this positive energy. But, that make you fit into social expectations and that make you fit into the natural flow of social relationship. And that makes you a decent person as seen by others for sure. But eventually you begin to fool yourself that you are a decent person in American style. So eventually I internalize this cultural value. So I feel I'm pretty comfortable and surely more natural to me to say, even when I'm tired, I'm excited, I'm thrilled, and so on. Okay, so that's cultural demand, and that's very, very strong. And Americans appears to have real problem when they fail to catch up to this cultural demand. So, for example, we are investigating physiological impact of experiencing negative emotions in American culture and Japanese culture. So, everybody feels sad, everybody feels frustrated, and so on. But some people do experience such negative emotions more frequently. Now, interesting finding is that among European American people, if you know that you are feeling those negative emotions, that seem to have negative impacts on your biological health. So the level where inflammation goes up and immunosuppression seem to kick in. That is, negative emotions seem to harm your biological health. Presumably mechanism is that it's so stressful in addition to being negative. I'm failing to live up to this cultural ideal of being enthusiastic, being positive, and so on. So experience negative emotion is negative for sure, but for Americans, it appears to be doubly negative in the sense that emotions are negative, but in addition to that, experiencing negative emotions is culturally inappropriate, indicating that you are not a decent, quote unquote, person as defined by this culture. But more than that, aging becomes very complicated and very interesting in this context. This pursuit of positive emotions must be balanced well if there are some other priorities. When you are young, you have jobs, you have obligations, you have all sorts of things that you have to do. And sometimes in your job, you have to deal with very unpleasant colleagues because it's necessary, and that's part of your job. And that's maybe necessary to make advancement in your personal agenda and so on. So to a degree, when you are young, this pursuit of positivity is balanced by some immediate need of life. So feeling positive is a cultural demand that is internalized among many Americans. And that's okay. And probably that works out very well until you fail to live up to that cultural ideal, which sometimes happen for some people almost inevitably when they get older.
Yeah, that's so true. We're expected to be positive and energetic as we age, and then we feel bad if we aren't. And that's not really the reality of aging because, like you said, our bodies and our brains decline and we have different roles that are more important. And it seems to me that taking a more realistic perspective is a more psychologically healthy way to approach the aging process.
Right. Now, my general point would be that every culture has a virtue. Positivity can be a virtue. But I would say if virtue become a demand, that can backfire. So, positivity, enthusiasm, that's really good, very adaptive. And in fact, I myself try to be enthusiastic, positive, and proactive. And I really value this aspects of American life that is largely missing in Japan or East Asia. But virtue imposed can be a burden. I think it's very important to keep that point in mind. And just to make the point clear, I'm not saying that aging in East Asia is much easier or much healthier. On the contrary, virtue emphasized in East Asia, say, for example, adjustment to age-based, age-graded expectations, that can be a burden too. I think it's a good thing to know that what's good about your culture and what can be potential limitation of it.
Yeah, that is so well said and so important. Could you also talk a little bit about low arousal emotions? I found that also to be so fascinating.
Yeah, generally, literature shows that low arousal emotion like calmness or relaxation, those are appreciated more in East Asia. So that may make aging process easier to some extent if your body or your health make it more challenging to experience, say, for example, enthusiasm and other high arousal emotions. And it is perfectly fine culturally to feel calm and to relax and to stay peaceful. And that's a culturally appreciated, a sanctioned emotional state. Evidence is very clear that those low arousal emotions are valued more in East Asia compared to North America.
Yeah, that is so interesting. You also had some really fascinating insights based on your longitudinal studies of purpose.
So that's a very complicated story, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy to study because you just cannot follow a single individual in their lifetime. So what we did was to use longitudinal data for 5 to 10 years. There's tremendous amount of individual variation, but you can kind of extrapolate. That is, you can infer overall age trend across time in some aspects of, say, meaning in life. Meaning in life has many aspects. For example, you feel your life is very meaningful when you think that you are experiencing some kind of growth as a person, or really purpose in life is fundamental in maintaining the sense that your life has direction, has some organization, some structure. Now, very, very interestingly, Americans show very sharp decline of personal growth and also sense of purpose in life after, say, 60 or surely 65. And that's considered to be the inevitable thing. What's the point of maintaining purpose when there's no time left? That seems like a completely sensible finding given, human biology.
Yeah.
But actually, when we looked at the data, Japanese don't show this effect. Japanese maintain overall, on average, keep feeling that they are still growing even though they are getting older. Or they have some purpose in life even when they get older. Now, what kind of purpose do they have? It seems very plausible to me that many Japanese would feel, yeah, my grandkids, or, maintaining my family lineage, or, creating some cohesive community in my neighborhood. Those become purpose in life, and also those kind of age-graded tasks may make you feel that you are showing some degree of growth, even though the contribution that you're making might be much less now than before.
Yes, definitely. You know, like I said earlier, your articles have really been personally meaningful. And I'm just really excited to share this conversation. As a person who's in this midlife phase, it's really helpful to think about what trajectory I want to be on and how I can live a meaningful life as I continue to age and adjust to the changes that I'm encountering. As we get towards the end of our conversation, what are some key takeaways you'd like to leave us with today?
We often conceptualize culture as something like clothes or some wear, sports shirts. In some culture, you have to wear sports shirts. Some other cultures, you have to wear something else. So, once you strip the person and make him naked, everybody is the same.
Mhm.
So that's one view of culture and human mind. Now, another very different view is that your person may be shaped by culture. So for example, if you use chopstick, your perception, your motor coordination change very systematically. Now, if that's merely chopstick as opposed to knives and forks, it's not a big deal. However, culture is here to organize your life, and your biology and your mind is meant to utilize those cultural resources to live good life and survive. So your mind may be transformed in some significant way. How you think about things, how you feel about things, what you try to do, and how you want to do it. All this may undergo some systematic transformation, which amounts to saying that culture become part of you. And now one implication of this is that this process of psychological transformation by culture may have significant impact on the aging process.
Yeah, I love that. I'm wondering, for those listeners and for me that are seeking further readings or more resources, what would you recommend?
If you go to my website, there's a general description of this field called cultural psychology. And I try to describe exactly what the field try to accomplish. Probably that's a good way to start learning a bit about this field. And now, if you are interested in cultural differences in aging, this American psychologist piece may be good, a little bit, academic, but hopefully that's not too difficult to read. So that may be a good introduction. And also, I want to emphasize that East and West is only one segment of massive cultural variations that you can find on the globe. So just I'm saying, okay, Westerners are like this and Asians are like this. That doesn't mean that nobody else is relevant.
That's right.
Very contrary, we are covering only tiny segment of the people on the globe. So actually, my current agenda or project right now, which we are doing with enthusiasm, is to go beyond East and the West. It's very important to expand the scope and to realize that surely West is only part of the story, and East Asia can be added to enrich the story, but still in combination, this story of East and the West is limited, severely limited, and that need to be expanded. If people are interested in this effort of expanding the field, we have another American psychologist piece published last year entitled Varieties of Interdependence. Again, that's a scholarly paper, but that's a review paper we try to write in a way that is highly accessible.
Yeah, I'll definitely put those links in the description of this episode so people can find those more easily. And I want to echo what you said. I'm so impressed with your writing style. It's very academic and professional, yet also very accessible. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, this has really been a wonderful conversation, and I just really appreciate your work and your time tremendously. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kyle. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this insightful conversation with Dr. Kitayama. I hope his unique perspectives on aging have offered valuable insights for your own journey through midlife. And I just really appreciate you listening today. It's really a joy to share these discussions, and I'm sending my best to each and every one of you. So until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and stay true to yourself. Hey there, listeners. I just wanted to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for listening to this podcast. Your support and feedback keep me motivated to continue growing and crafting episodes that are meaningful and helpful for you on your journey. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Gen X Mindscape community page on Facebook. It's a great space to share your feedback on the show, suggest future episode topics, or simply connect with fellow listeners. Also, don't hesitate to leave me a voice message over at genxmindscape.com by clicking on Leave a Voice Message at the top of the page. Whether you choose to remain anonymous or provide your name and email, it's entirely up to you. Once again, thanks so much for listening. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you.